Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Francine, and I'm a campaign manager at the Ad Council, which is a nonprofit organization that develops different communications campaigns around some of the most pressing issues facing our country today. There, I get to work on some amazing and impactful campaigns, and the one that I hold most near and dear to my heart is our campaign called Seize the Awkward. The campaign, which is sponsored by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and the JET Foundation, really acknowledges the fact that having conversations about mental health may be uncomfortable at first, but they're totally worth it and can definitely make a difference. We work to not only empower young adults to speak about mental health, but also to provide them with the tools they need to do so. And as some of you may or may not know, September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And in honor of this month, we've partnered with Guild Wars 2 to empower players to check in with each other and highlight some of the many ways that friends can reach out to one another online. So before we jump into this panel, I would love it if each of our panelists could introduce themselves and also speak a little bit about their personal connection to gaming and or mental health.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Christine Moutier. I am the Chief Medical Officer at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And like Francine said, at AFSP, we care so much about everyone's mental health, and we also fund the science that provides solutions and answers for how we can prevent suicide. And that's, within our homes, our relationships, our workplaces, and also within health systems. And we advocate for those policies at the federal and state level to really change the culture that we live in so that it's safe for all of us to be able to do better for ourselves and our loved ones in our communities. And like Francine said, at AFSP, we worked with them closely and the JET Foundation on the Seize the Awkward campaign. So it's really a pleasure to be here speaking to you all in the gaming community, which is another community that's very near and dear to my heart. So thank you for this opportunity.
You're muted.
Off to a great start. Such a wonderful follow-up. Hi, my name is Nick Hernandez, and I am a game designer at ArenaNet, and I specialize in open world and multiplayer player-versus environment content. And I've been a part of some of the Seize the Awkward actual campaign products that have come out of things recently. So I was given the opportunity to come and kind of share my experiences along with, how we develop our products to kind of help facilitate communication. That's me.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, I'm Ruby Baer. I am a content marketing specialist at ArenaNet working on Guild Wars 2, and I've been helping work with the Ad Council for a little while on the Seize the Awkward program. I do a lot of interaction with our community in Guild Wars 2, and I host our live streams helping our developers and our community talk back and forth. So that's me.
Thank you all for sharing. So mental health is such an important topic that not many people talk about, whether it's because they feel uncomfortable or it's just something that's taboo in their families when they're growing up. So I'm really happy that we're all here to have this discussion today. We're not only going to talk about the importance of having a conversation about mental health, but we're also going to be talking about the impact that the gaming community has on mental health, especially during this time of physical distancing. So to start off, Dr. Moutier, could you tell us a little bit more about the current landscape of mental health, especially in young adults, given the shift in the climate during this time where people are dealing with emotional stressors caused by things like the coronavirus pandemic or the Black Lives Matter protests?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a time when you'd be hard pressed to find a single person who's not being stressed in some pretty significant way by the pandemic, by this incredible social justice movement that we're in. So it's a time where I think the common experience starts with a level of feeling uncertain. And that uncertainty started with the virus itself, which was, of course, new and poorly understood and created all kinds of questions in terms of what it will mean for us to go to school, to go to work, for our financial security. Once the shelter-in-place orders came down, that meant that everyone's lives had to shift in a way that honestly, it's been 6 months now, and phase by phase, data from national polls shows that young people and old people alike are actually experiencing a lot more anxiety, depressive symptoms, feelings of grief, or feeling isolated or alone. But we also know that it's a time where, because so many people are experiencing such sort of shared trauma, if you will, around this time, the national dialogue has been just really covering this topic incredibly well during this time. And that actually creates a sense of, in a way, normalcy, that it's okay not to be okay, especially at a time like this. And that the more we can talk about it and share those experiences, the better. And that's the starting point to feeling not alone, to connecting to others, and really, finding ways to cope and to thrive the best we can. This is not about perfection. It never needs to be, but it's a time when I think discovering what works for you and how to encourage your loved ones, this time has created some new opportunities for that. So it's been a mixture of a lot of heaviness and difficulty, alongside really a bursting open around the dialogue related to our stress and mental health, which can be a really positive thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's been so much discussion about it, and I think something that has helped to kind of break down that taboo about talking about mental health, because we're all distancing. So many of our conversations have become from in person to online, and that means that people are starting to share little tidbits here and there of, I'm not okay and here's why. I'm struggling and here's why. That's happening online so much more than ever before, in front of everyone, and showing people, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm not weird for feeling like this. I'm not wrong or being a baby for feeling like this. Everyone feels that way. And I think it's helping people feel a lot more comfortable.
And if I can kind of echo off of that, I think that it's,
Please.
at least for me, like extremely useful and telling, because it also shows that like people who have these, who grow up with these barriers, like men not being able to communicate and be like, hey, I have these emotions, right? These negative emotions. This like having the entire world kind of being in the same boat, I think really helps break down those barriers and show people that like it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter, if you are, like your sex doesn't matter, your race doesn't matter, your ethnicity doesn't matter. What matters is that you're a human being, and we're all struggling in our own way, and we should be able to communicate about it and talk about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. And I think what's interesting is that, like you all said before, there's so many people dealing with mental health issues right now, because we're all going through the same thing. I know recently CDC put out a study that said nearly half of people who, between the ages of 18 and 19, reported feeling symptoms of anxiety or depression. And a quarter of young adults have seriously contemplated suicide during this pandemic, which is a really gut-wrenching stat to see. But in other studies, it's also been found that about 76% of young adults will turn to a peer in a time of crisis of support, which is why I think starting conversations like this and developing that vulnerability beforehand is super important. But for many young adults, isolation and physical distancing have posed as such a big barrier to reaching out or obtaining that social support that is needed during times like this. So my second question is, how has online communication and gaming taken a larger role of filling that void?
So,
Well, I'll just
yeah, go ahead. Please. This is the hardest part of doing these virtually.
It really is.
I know.
It really
I know.
is.
I mean, I'm totally interested to what you guys are experiencing and seeing in the gaming community, but from like the public health standpoint, at the end of March, the World Health Organization officially made the recommendation to play online games as a way to stay safe and actually like prevent spread of the virus. So there was that from like, the top down, which was really actually kind of cool to see. But yeah, I am really interested to learn more about what has been happening in terms of the dialogue and just the tone within gaming communities, which I'm sure is very diverse as well.
Yeah.
So Nick, you go.
I was actually going to say, Ruby, you go. I think that like at least starting off from a like how the community has been shaped and kind of like how our community team has been able to kind of help facilitate at that. I think that's something that I can dovetail off of personally. Sorry.
So no, it's okay. So something that we talked about way back when this started internally was that we had noticed a lot more people are playing the game, and obviously here's why. And we had a lot of conversations about how what can we do to help? What can we do to give players things to do and stuff to do together? And one of the biggest things, without getting too much into it, is that we didn't want to feel like we were being predatory about it. We didn't be like, oh, like this is clearly an opportunity to make money off the pandemic. Was like a huge thing that we wanted to avoid, but we wanted to help players make those connections in our game since it was already happening. So the conversation was around what can we do to facilitate this, and we started throwing out like extra like events with bonus experience and that kind of thing in the game. Again, without getting too much into the weeds about exactly what in the game we did. But helping those conversations and focusing on events that people could do together and things that encouraged playing with others. So it wasn't just like, hey, here's a thing to go out and do by yourself. So that was a lot of the conversation about how can we foster that sense of togetherness and that sense of camaraderie that's starting to grow in our game because of this.
Yeah.
So, and Nick might be able to talk about that more from the design side.
I mean, like, so at least for those of you who don't know, so Ruby and I work at ArenaNet, and our main product right now is Guild Wars 2. It is an MMO, and what we found is that a lot of people are actually coming to MMOs, more specifically because of that kind of community-centric design and the community-centric gameplay elements. I think, like, as a company, we were lucky in the fact that we had already had this. We have like a rolling release cadence where we release like seasonal content every X amount of months, and it's usually based around kind of, once again, multiplayer, environmental storytelling, like narrative, and then multiplayer gameplay. So I think that we were lucky in the fact that we already kind of had this platform and this structure that would be able to help people who come to our game be able to interact with each other and like be added to the communities, help foster growth within the communities, and help kind of individuals find who they're looking for. I think that during the pandemic specifically, we did have to make some decisions around how our releases were also impacted by that and kind of what that would mean for our player base. So with our most recent releases, we actually released without VO because of the fact that we wanted to keep the cadence rolling so that way people would still be able to engage with the game and help the new players see that this game is still healthy and alive, but also kind of give those experienced players something to kind of engage with. So I think that does that answer the question? I feel like I apologize, lost my train of thought, but long story short,
I think so.
yeah.
And actually, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just long story short, we have kind of pushed to maintain the ability to help people kind of engage with our game so they can join communities, once again, grow communities, and help kind of foster that communication.
If I can touch on the VO thing for just a second, something that we did, and to expand a little bit on what Nick was saying about releasing without VO, we have a huge voice acting cast in our game, literally dozens of actors, and we record in huge chunks where everybody crams into this tiny little studio down in Burbank, California. to do like a mass recording session of a week or two, depending on how big the session is. Obviously, that was not possible. And we were not in a position at that point to know how long this was going to go on. So we worked with our voice actors and asked them to record just like little cell phone videos in their homes, talking to our players and saying, hey, this is not safe for us. This is not safe for the people of the studio. We want to get these voices into the game for you guys as soon as we possibly can. And it was good because we have a stellar acting cast that truly does love working on our game. And a lot of them were happy to jump in and help our community understand that we are all in this together and that this is affecting our voice acting cast for the same reasons that our players' lives are being affected. So that was a really fun project that we got to do a couple of times with a compilation video of our voice actors' faces and voices expressing understanding for what we were all going through.
Thank you for that. I think that was really helpful. You both, all three of you, answered the question really well. I think another thing to kind of like piggyback off of that question, I see that you all are doing a lot of things inside the game, but wanted to touch on a few of the things that you guys are doing outside of the gaming world. Like, I know you mentioned you had a Gamers Giving Back initiative. Did you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah.
I guess I'll take this one. So actually, this one specifically is a myriad mix of the in-game world and the outside of game world, which is actually really interesting. I will cite Gamers Giving Back as an example, and Ruby can add more if she thinks of any others. But in our game, our community creates their own events that allows for people to do things like raise money or help people find guilds, which in our game are basically an in-game structure that allows for people to join each other and kind of have like a clan or an alliance or a party of like hundreds of people. And what Gamers Giving Back as an example do is they will create these community-driven events that will allow people to raise money for things like breast cancer. With this one event called Pink Day, there's this one called Toga Party that does things with raising money for multiple sclerosis. And we also have Pride and LGBTQ related events driven once again from the community with things like Pride marches within game where people actually walk through the entirety of our game's map, which is very large, and just kind of it's a Pride march through the entirety of our world. And having community-driven events like that is monumental and extremely useful. And the fact that like our players have decided to do those things of their own volition, of their own will, I think is amazing and monumental. And it's definitely like I've seen proof of it helping newer people who come into the game, which I think is fantastic. So it's not just the developers; it's also the community that help kind of drive these pushes for inclusion, which I think is really important.
Yeah. And it's important to note that we have what I'm going to call a little bit of a head start, because we have this years-long history of this sort of thing in our community. And we built a game from the ground up where the thing was, you should always be glad to see another player. So we've created a game world anyway that is designed hopefully for togetherness and, again, being happy to see other people. So our community has really played off of that. Like Nick said, Gamers Giving Back is a good example. They've been doing fundraisers for various causes in our game for years, and just taking it out of game to have that dual experience. And since we've all been quarantined, I've seen that come up in all sorts of facets of our community. And they will do even just like fun little things like a costume contest in game. And they'll round up some little prizes to give out. We have Halloween is coming up in our game, and we have a group that always does a big Halloween party. I have an email from one of them. They're already planning that just to make it bigger and more exciting this year because of the pandemic. So yeah, we gave them a springboard to work with, and they have just really run with it in the past 6 months.
That's amazing. I love to see like how the community just comes together and does all these different activities. I think that's one of the great things about the gaming world is that it really brings people together from all walks of life. You have people, different genders, from different cultural backgrounds, familial backgrounds, and all of these different upbringings and experience create different barriers when it comes to things, bringing it back to like mental health. So I think it's important when, we encourage people to reach out about mental health that to know that not everyone's kind of like on the same level of talking about it. And the comfort level is not the same. Some may need time, some may be an open book. So as we broach the topics of reaching out and talking about mental health online, I think we should always try to have like two things, which are patience and understanding that we're all different people with different backgrounds who are brought together by our love of gaming. For me specifically, as a Black woman who was raised in a single parent Caribbean household, I was raised to be a strong, independent person. And in my household, mental health issues didn't really exist. And we didn't talk about our emotions. And I'm a Cancer, so I'm very emotional, which means that, I just have to suppress a lot of my emotions for a good period of my life. And I didn't really start to explore my feelings or emotions until I went to college, and which was obviously like an already overwhelming time. So I think my next question, I want to know a little bit about each of your upbringings and experiences and how that impacted your take on mental health, and what are some things you've done or are working on to overcome that?
We'll start with Christine.
Okay,
Christine. I don't know if we want to do this in order, if we just like go ahead.
Yeah, no, I can chime in. So I'm half Asian American, half white, and my household was more culturally predominantly Asian. And that meant for me, at least growing up in LA, like number one, believe it or not, there weren't a lot of Hapa people, part Asian. And so I always felt a little bit different. And then in our household, we, similar to what you shared, Francine, emotions, you don't show up with anything but a happy emotion. And that means like, then you get praised that, children are there to work hard in their studies, be a, whatever it is, an achieving musician in my case, and, be obedient and compliant and happy all the time. And so I will say that later on in my life, what happened was your value being based in achievement works while it's working. And then when either anxiety or actual failure starts to creep into your life, which for all of us, we're going to face challenges, we're going to fail at different things. That is normal and healthy. But if you don't grow up knowing that, or knowing that it's okay and you can get through it, that growth mindset instead of the perfectionistic mindset. For me, that came during medical school, and it was a major crisis, and I got help. I got therapy for the first time, and it was life-changing for me. So, I mean, it has shaped, probably everything about what I do now. My sole professional and personal passion and mission in life is about preventing suicide for the nation. And one little thing that we've done, like in raising our own kids who are now young adults, that when they were little, they were allowed to express their emotions. Some of the first words that our son Luke learned to say is when he was like 18 months or 2 years old, I'm mad because, I'm sad because. And it sounds funny, but letting them experience those emotions as like normal, healthy states of human experience, and then you can help them make choices around it and learn how to process them. So even to this day, it's really about how do I, keep a super busy life going, but allow myself time to process the difficult things, to, in a way, like honor that. And also to just stay physically and mentally healthy, which is about how much sleep you get, if you're exercising, limiting alcohol intake, limiting media exposure, because even that around the pandemic or the social justice stuff can get overwhelming. And especially if you have any history of depression or trauma. So it's really about learning how to navigate your own life, and then hopefully inspiring others to do the same, because once you learn that it's not taboo and that's actually something that we can make a difference for ourselves, it actually can inspire others when those are open topics, at the dinner table or in your friend group.
Nick, do you want to go next? Because there's something I've noticed with all three of us that I wanted to touch on afterwards.
Sure. So I come from a Latinx centric family. I am primarily Cuban, and kind of dovetailing off of what the both of you said, in my culture as well, we are very like men don't show emotion unless it's positive. Like we are a very touchy-feely culture, and kind of family in general, but with us it's like when it comes to negative emotions, we it's pretty commonplace to hide them and to hold them, especially if you are a man or identify as a man. I guess like kind of also in our cultures, we help take care of people, like we help take care of our elders. So whereas like you were talking about earlier, that drive for needing to always feel perfect. I think with us, it's like the drive of hiding kind of how we're feeling with, as an example, the natural events that happen throughout a person's life. Like my grandparents helped raise me because my mother was a single parent, and I had to be there for them at a young age, helping them. Uh, Helping them kind of like taking care of them as they took care of me when I was younger, and seeing the cycles of aging and death come forward as a child, and then having to take in all of those emotions and not being able to actually convey them because the need to show strength and happiness was definitely difficult. And as the same as you two, impacted me throughout my life. And it wasn't until more recently, I think, when I entered my 20s, went to college, moved out of the state that I was living in, and got a chance to be myself and think about myself first, that I really started to learn that like it's okay to show your emotions, especially if you're a man or identify as a man. It's okay to show that you are struggling. It's okay to bring up how your past has affected you and have those conversations. And those are things that I like personally subjectively care about a lot, which is why I'm here today to show that like, hey, we can talk about our emotions. It's okay. We're all humans. We all have emotions. And all forms of pain are valid and important.
So for me, I had a it was this very stoic German background in my family, where you don't talk about your emotions. You don't whine. There was a lot of that. What are you crying for? You don't have anything to cry about, because, well, I'm sad was not really a thing that you were supposed to do, because you don't have anything to be sad about. Your life is good. And there's some reinforcement there too, because I grew up in a very loving two-parent household, but it was that there are family backgrounds on both of my parents' sides, where things could have been better, and they both individually learned that very stoic demeanor, and that very you don't whine and cry outwardly. So we had that, and the other half of that is that I'm a little bit older than, well, at least Nick, and I was a kid in the 80s where depression and social anxiety and ADHD, those weren't things yet. I was always that kid who does not pay attention in class on her report card and does not complete assignments. And I remember my parents being wildly frustrated because, why are you lazy? Why won't you pay attention? And if you just did better, if you just tried harder, you obviously could overcome this thing. So there's a very strong two-pronged background of conditioning there, that I'm honestly I'm not entirely comfortable being weak or whining. That's a thing that I am still progressing on. And honestly, working with the Seize the Awkward campaign, working with the ad council has helped a lot. But yeah, there was that very strong background where we didn't know what was wrong with me. Just that I needed to stop whining about it.
Actually, if
And
I can just add to that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Just real quick, the thread that I have noticed, it's all different reasons, it's all different backgrounds, but it is, you don't talk about bad emotions and you don't be weak, is the foundation of what all of us have had.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
And
Nick.
just to kind of like, sorry, reinforcing what Ruby had mentioned earlier, like, you know, it affects us all both in different but very similar ways, because just like Ruby, you know, in school, I didn't do so well because it wasn't until later on that I was diagnosed with like severe depression or like clinical depression and severe anxiety that I, like, you know, I have to take medications for, and I go to therapy. But like before I kind of realized those things, you know, it affected my schooling, it affected the way I interact with individuals, and you know, just like Ruby, it was like, you're smart, you just need to push yourself, like have drive.
Apply yourself.
Yeah, apply yourself, you've got this, you can do it. And it's like,
Yep.
it just felt like a mountain on your back, and it's like, how am I supposed to carry this, how am I supposed to live with these expectations when I'm walking on glass and it feels like my entire body is sore, right?
Yeah. And I need help was not an option.
Yeah, exactly. Or even if it was an option, you as an individual didn't feel empowered to be able to go seek out that option, and there weren't exactly individuals who would come to you with that option, which I think is also something that's really important to kind of note and touch on.
Yeah, I feel like you can go ahead.
Oh, just the barriers are just there for all of us. And I think even for young people growing up in a really progressive home these days, which is fantastic if you are, where these are like, where mental health, like physical health, is something that we can talk about, we can address as a family, lean on professionals. There's still going to be that human instinct that feels like when you're not feeling well, your brain is a physical organ in your body, and our brains lie to us at different times for different reasons. But when you're not well and you're not at your best, it produces this sort of really powerful sense that it is weakness and it is shameful. And so you actually have to put things in place in society and in the home and in schools that are ready for that and can actually overcome those internal barriers so that people are reminded that it is safe. And I mean, the really cool thing, I think, you know, I'm curious actually for Nick, and for Ruby and Francine, like that the more your own journey has progressed, if people in your life have come and shared their own struggles with you because they've identified you as a safe resource. And I'm thinking that kind of spread of just a safe, respectful environment where any need, including mental health needs, are not taboo and in fact are really kind of extra welcomed, that can be something that's promoted in any environment, including in a gaming community like we're hearing about.
Yeah. If I can, that you just brought to mind a really sharp illustration of the difference. Like Nick and I were talking about, we struggled in school. And when I struggled in school, what I got was, and this was just like one series of incidents, but what I got was my desk pushed up to the front of the classroom, like against the chalkboard, as a punishment. The idea was to shame me into doing what I was supposed to. When my youngest daughter struggled in high school, and she just graduated in June, when she struggled in high school, her teacher said, okay, we have a 504 plan for this. This is what we can do to help her do better. She was struggling in exactly the same way as me, But because I've talked about that a little bit, and when she started struggling, I recognized that. I was able to talk to her, and we were able to go to her school together. And they helped her instead of just being like, well, you're clearly screwing up and on purpose, so we're going to punish you. It was night and day.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Also, to kind of like piggyback on that, I think, what you said earlier, Nick, about each of us kind of it affecting all of us in a different way. For me, it didn't really affect me academically, but it did emotionally in a sense that I felt the need, because I didn't want to express emotion. I felt myself distancing myself from people that I cared about because I didn't want to feel anything. And it, when I got to college, that started to change, and I started to realize that this is not the right behavior. And back to what Christine said, I feel like even recently, because I've been starting to prioritize my mental health a lot, my friends and family do come to me about certain things just to talk through. And it's interesting because when I first started college, didn't really talk about mental health that much, but then now a lot of my friends from college, we find ourselves like on the phone talking about like things that we've talked to our therapist about, and just it's interesting how it's become so like natural and organic over time, from my end. But I thought that was just a really interesting thing that I've noticed recently, that how we're slowly but surely destigmatizing mental health in a good way, and people are more encouraged to actually talk about it.
I love that that's a friend conversation.
Yeah, same. And I think
I love
that, like,
so much.
once again, kind of going off of what Christine had mentioned, like I also do see it at times where I have friends or like coworkers, that like even in normal kind of work environment conversations, things can at times tilt towards, more conversations of mental health and how each individual is doing. And like I am always for those conversations. Like work is important, but your mental health and your health in general, wherever you work, whatever you're doing, is, in my opinion, always going to be the most important. So when things do tend towards that, at least like me subjectively, I try to push for those things because, like I had mentioned earlier, it was hard, and it still to this day is hard for me to open up to individuals about myself. And that's once again also something I'm working on, just like Ruby. It's one of the reasons why I accepted to join in having these conversations. But being able to have those conversations and help people understand that like it is okay to talk about these things, like your pain is valid, especially in the time of COVID, like all the time forever. It's important. But right now, what people have to understand is that like everyone is going through some level of trauma. It doesn't around the it could be around the protests that are happening in America with Black Lives Matter, or in different countries, or it could just be how the quarantine and the pandemic has affected you as an individual, whether you can't find a job or you do have a job but it's extraneous, or you are locked up by yourself, or just all of these different circumstances. Being able to have those conversations now and understand now that like your mental health is extremely important, and it's okay to not be okay, and everybody is not okay to some extent right now. I think that all those things are extremely important. I say important a lot, but it's important.
But you're right.
and yeah, just let's talk. Let's have these conversations. Let's be open.
I love that you're saying about the priority you place on your health and your mental health, because it's such a confusing moment. I think, understandably, it's like it's hard to tease that apart, and our brains tend to ascribe blame on the situation we're in. And if only that thing would resolve, or my partner would behave a different way, or I were paid more, or whatever, we think then that would be the solution. And it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that when you get your mental health optimized, then your relationships go differently and better. Your work performance changes. You find creative solutions to the challenges that you thought were impossible before. It's like, it really is that pivotal. So anyway, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. And to dovetail off of what you said, I think it's also important to realize that like these things make our lives harder. So like like you are going to fail at certain things, and that's okay. And these things make it harder to succeed, but like I think it's important for us to learn that like we are all going to fail, and like this impacts us so much more. And having that understanding of like things are going to be harder, we're going to fail, bad things are going to happen, they're going to impact us more, but it's okay. And like we will get through this. I think that's something that I really hope that everybody kind of I hope that if anything positive comes out of this quarantine, it is the fact that people understand bad stuff happens. We should be comfortable talking about it and being accepting of it, because at the end of the day, if I'm not feeling good and my work is suffering because of it, me understanding that like that is not a failure point on myself, right? Like I don't have to try harder, I don't have to push this rock up with this mountain even harder. Like it is a byproduct of the environment and what's going on. Having that understanding, having that kind of self-evaluation, self-analysis, I think is extremely important.
Yeah, and I think that kind of like leads me to my next question. So like what are some, like how can we help others who aren't comfortable talking about mental health gain that comfort to reach out to their friends? And what are some signs that indicate that someone may be struggling with their mental health?
I've definitely been noticing.
Go ahead.
You go, Ruby.
We're just going to keep doing this, so
Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah,
I actually just wanted to touch on that first point. How do you encourage others to reach out? Something that I had mentioned in the group before when we were just chatting before we started a recording is I think there's still a lingering lack of realization that we're all going through the same thing to some extent. And I referenced just a joke image that I had seen going around where it said at the beginning of quarantine, like 6 months ago, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were all like, oh yeah, I'm going to get abs. I'm going to get in shape. 6 months later, I wonder if I can eat all of this whole bag of chocolate chips in 15 minutes. And everybody, you see people passing that around, everybody's kind of laughing, oh, ha, ha, it's me. And not necessarily realizing what this is saying is that we all feel that way. And there's this misconception that, oh, here's this funny joke that happens to apply to me as an individual, and I'm going to make a joke about how it's me. But people aren't necessarily seriously understanding this is going around. This is making the rounds because it's true of everyone. And those little truth and jest images are such a good little wedge to get in there and open up that conversation while everybody's laughing and feeling that recognition in the back of their head.
And Twitter is such a powerful tool for this, especially
in
now.
Good and bad
like
ways.
in good and bad ways, yeah. Like when you're talking about those memes and those images, like I'm scrolling, like
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, because there are actual, like you can see the trend of how memes work within Twitter, and it's just really interesting because all of them have kind of turned to like there's this one where it's like, I hope this letter finds you well, and then it's like this letter finds me, and then it's just like a terrible picture.
I saw that today.
And then it's like, yeah, it's like my mind or something along those lines, and then it's just like a cat screaming, or just all these different images that people are equating to like how I feel right now, and everybody is like, LOL, same, like.
But it's being perceived as an individual and coincidental thing, rather than a universal, hey, this is a funny joke illustration that we're all struggling, and it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah, that sense of togetherness can it's hard to even like wrap your head around why it is, except that if you think about, we're wired as social creatures. We've got neurons in the brain that specifically their function is to mirror each other. That's why fashion is a thing, and language quirks and behavioral contagion. We're really hardwired that way. So when we realize that we're connected to each other through these experiences, it's really powerful at a level that I think it doesn't even necessarily have to be a conscious thought level. It's like a deep sense. And we really are all in this together. And I hope that everyone who is in the gaming community and who's tuning into this can tap into that sense that your suffering is yours, but that there are others who are going through things that are like it, or other types of challenges, and we can connect on that. And again, without shame, without a sense of like embarrassment for where I'm at personally, we really can shed that feeling. It's kind of like extra baggage that's been with us through all sorts of different reasons, culturally and whatnot. But what happens when you shed it is you can be more authentically yourself, and your relationships can actually go deeper as well because of that.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the point that, it's okay to not be okay. So what are some signs that that one should look out for if they feel like a friend is struggling?
I think withdrawal is a big one. I have a group of friends that pre-pandemic we would go out to dinner together regularly. And once we couldn't really do that anymore, we started doing a regular weekly Hangouts call. And if somebody doesn't show for that weekly call, people are texting them and messaging them on Discord, "Where are you? What's going on?" And it's a group of us that keep track of each other and check in and make sure we're okay, and just give each other like a couple hours a week of just silliness and relaxation, and making sure, hey, how's everybody doing?
I've learned to take little comments maybe a little more seriously than in normal times, just in the sense that if you're not like seeing your coworkers in person and you're only on Zoom calls together, that's going to be the opportunity for people to kind of let out the little hint. I mean, we're weird that way. Like, we don't just lay it out for the people around us, but we also don't keep it a secret very well. So people will actually say things like, COVID is really getting to me. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Like, little statements like that. When I've circled back with a colleague or someone that just kind of tweaked my radar, in some cases has actually turned out to be like the tip of a much bigger iceberg of the experience that they're having. And again, they may only put it out there with like one tiny little thing. And otherwise you'd think they're pretty, life as usual. They're showing up, they're delivering on their whatever work product and stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you for that. So we've talked a lot about, sorry, Nick, you can go ahead.
I mean, I was just going to say that they both said that pretty beautifully. I think that another thing to note that's important is kind of self-analysis and self-evaluation as well. Because while being able to catch those signs and reach out to people is like really beneficial and powerful. And then being able to once again identify those things. I think it's also important for us to kind of like take this time to look at ourselves. And I know it's very scary. It was very scary for me. It's always scary for me. But just being able to be like, am I okay? Right? Am I not okay? What's kind of going on? How am I feeling about this? And then seeing how I'm engaging with others or if I'm not engaging with others. Because I think that like, as individuals, reaching out to other people is important, but it can also be, scary or taxing for some people that, are introverted or don't, or have these like mental doubts. So I think that like, if you are one of those individuals, being able to kind of take a moment to breathe and just look at yourself and be like, am I okay? If I'm not, how can I work on this? How can I make this better? And understand that like, progress is progress if it's made, right? Like a step a day, a step a day keeps the doctor away. Sorry. Not really. But, understanding that like once you identify those things, you don't have to do a sprint, right? To try to fix them. It's, slow steps, progress is progress. And yeah, sorry. Like the other two said things like summed up the like reaching out to people, identification so well that I think that the only thing I really had to contribute was just like self-reflection is important.
That's such a huge point, though, and that's such a good point. And the fact that it is hard, and you might say, okay, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna do this self-reflection thing, and you might nope out of that the first time or the first couple of times, and you might, I'm not wrong. I know of which I speak. No, you might back away from that. You might back away from reaching out to other people because it's hard and it's scary. And like we've all shown, so many of us have been conditioned against that. And it doesn't feel wrong, but it feels hard. And like there's this huge barrier. So just come back. Don't just do this once and be like, well, I'm clearly fine. I'm done here. Unless you are actually fine. And if so, tell me your secrets.
Well, I think we're about out of time. So I feel like this went by so quickly. So I just want to thank each of you for just being open and vulnerable and taking the time to talk about gaming and mental health. And I also want to thank those of you who are tuning in. I hope this conversation was very thought-provoking and motivating. And for any of you who are struggling with reaching out to a friend about mental health or just interested in learning about the partnership with CZ Awkward and Guild Wars 2, I encourage you to visit czawkward.org/guild-wars-2 to learn more.